In today's lesson, we are going to be reviewing how to find the mean, and we're going to be talking about how to find median and mode. So this is what we're working with today. We have two different sets of data. We are going to find the mean, we are going to find the median, and we are going to find the mode of each of these sets. Let's go ahead and start with the mean, or the average, and we have to think about what we learned in our last lesson. What was that? What we learned was that the mean, or the average, is equal to the sum of all the numbers divided by the number of responses that there are. So in our first data set, we are going to look at it and we can see that there are 5 responses. So that's what we are going to be dividing by. Let's go ahead and find the sum. I have gone ahead and taken the first data set and written it down as an addition problem. I note that I may want to reorder this addition problem to do it easier. I know that 3 and 7 makes a 10, so I'm just going to rewrite this problem very quickly. We can then go ahead and solve this simple addition problem. 10 and 10 is 20, plus 5 more, it's going to be 25. 0 doesn't matter, so this is equal to 25. Okay, so we have our sum of all the numbers. Now we have to divide by the number of responses. How many responses are there in data set number 1? There are 5 of them. So we are going to take 25 divided by 5. 25 divided by 5 is going to be equal to 5. So that is my mean, or my average. Now let's take a look at the second data set. We have 6 responses this time, so that's going to change things a little bit. And also the numbers are different. So we have 1 plus 3, which is 4. 3 more is 7. Plus 5 would be 12. Plus 7 would be 19. Plus 11 would be 30. Got to work on those mental math skills. Going back to that basic principle that the mean, or the average, is equal to the sum of all the numbers divided by the number of responses. We have our sum of all the numbers. How many responses were there? 6 in the second one. So we are going to do 30 divided by 6. And if you're not really good with division, we could think, well, what times 6 is equal to 30? That's 5. So 30 divided by 6 has to be 5. And there you have it. Now for the median. Now, one thing that I need you to think about when you're thinking about the median, and something that has stuck with me on how I can remember this after, 18 years? Median starts with an M, ends with an N. This is the middle number. Median, middle number, first and last letter. Remember that. Put it in your notebook. Take a mental picture. Now, median can get a little bit tricky when there's an odd number of responses. So data set number 2 in this one might be a little bit complicated, but number 1 is about as easy as it gets. You just have to be very methodical, and you have to know what you're doing. Step number 1, you have to put them in order from least to greatest. And there you have it. Data set number 1, least to greatest. Step number 2, we are going to start crossing off numbers, but we have to do so in a certain way. We are going to start crossing off numbers. We're going to take 1 from the left side and 1 from the right side. Now, why would we do this? Because we're trying to find the number that is in the middle of our data set. Now, you might be saying, I see it right now, Mr. Peterson. Yes, but there's only 5 numbers here. Imagine if there was 20. It might be a little bit more difficult. So we're going to start trying to find the middle number. We're going to look at here. We have a 0. That one's gone. 10, gone. 3, gone. 7, gone. So I'm going from 1 from the top, 1 from the bottom, the biggest number, the next smallest number, the next biggest number, and we are left with the number that sits right in the middle of our data set. So the median for our first data set is 5. Our middle number was 5. Now we are going to move on to the second data set. This is where things get a little bit tricky, or it could be if you don't know what you're doing, but you're going to know what you're doing, so it's not going to be tricky. Remember that step 1 is to put your data set from least to greatest. And that is exactly what we have right here. 1, 3, 3, 5, 7, 11 goes from least to greatest. Question is, how is this different from last time? Well, there's a different number of responses. If you said that, you're right. There are 6 responses this time, and that changes things because there is no middle of the data set that is a number that's already a part of it. What do I mean by that? If we look back at our first example, our median was 5 because we were able to cross off the 0, then the 10, the 3, then the 7, and we were left with 5. It was a number already in our data set. When we start crossing off numbers this time, let's see what happens. We're going to take away the smallest number, followed by the biggest number. Then we're going to look for the next smallest number. It's a 3. We're going to take away 1 from the other side, a 7. Well, there is no middle. I can't take away the 3 and the 5. I'd be left with nothing. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the mean or the average of these two numbers. And if we can remember what mean or average is equal to, we just did it in the last problem. It's the sum of all the numbers divided by the number of responses. So we're going to add those two numbers that are left together in the middle, and we're going to divide by 2. There's only 2 numbers. We're adding 2 numbers, we're going to divide by 2. So we have a 3 and a 5 in the middle. So this would mean we need to do 3 plus 5, which is 8. We're not done yet because that is not the average of these 2 numbers. There's 2 of them, right? So we're going to take 8. We are going to divide by 2. 8 divided by 2, or what times 2 would equal 8? Well, that's 4. So our median for this problem be equal to 4. One quick tip is that if you are finding the median and you're curious, is it going to be easy, or am I going to have to do that thing that we just did on data set number 2 and find the average of 2 numbers? You have to look at the number of responses. If there's an odd number of responses, like in the first problem, there were 5 responses, that question is pretty simple. You're able to cross off 1 at the beginning, 1 at the end, 1 at the beginning, 1 at the end, and you'll be left with a number right in the middle. But on the second problem, there were 6 responses. That means there's an even number of responses. There will not be a number that's exactly in the middle of that data set. And that's when we have to find the average of 2 numbers that are sitting in the middle. The final thing that we're going to talk about today is we are going to find the mode of a data set. So finding the mode, the thing that stuck with me for 18 years is this little trick right here. The mode is also the number that occurs the most often. Most often. What does that mean? Well, the number that occurs the most. When we're answering this question, there are about 3 different ways that you can answer it. There can be multiple numbers that occur the same number of times. You could have no mode, meaning that no number ever repeats. And you can have one mode. There is one number that occurs the most often or repeats the most in your data set. So let's see what we have in the 2 that we have created for us today. So here is our first data set. We can see the first thing we want to look for when we're trying to find the mode. Is there any number that repeats? And if we look at this, no number ever repeats. So like I just said, one of the answers that you can have is no mode. And this would be an example of when there is no mode. So I would just write that out. No mode. You don't need the exclamation point, but I just want to emphasize my point. There is no mode here. There's no number that repeats. Here is our second data set. First thing we're looking for when we're trying to find the mode. Is there a number that repeats? 1, 3, 3, 5, 7, 11. Oh yeah, 3 repeats. Okay, is there any other number that repeats? Nope. So our mode, or the number that occurs the most often in this data set, has to be 3. So our mode is equal to 3. I want to give you guys one more example before we're done with the lesson today, because there is one more answer that you can get for mode. And that I told you earlier is the fact that you can have more than one. You could have 2, you could have 3, you could have 4 different modes in a data set. It all depends on if you have numbers that repeat the same number of times. Okay, let me give you some numbers so that this makes sense. So here is our final example, our third example. We are going to be looking for numbers that occur or numbers that repeat. In this case, we have a 0, a 5, and a 5. Okay, 5 repeats twice. Here's a 6, 100, 100. 100 repeats twice, and a 500. Okay, so the fact that 5 repeats and 100 repeats, and they both repeat the same number of times, this means that we have 2 different modes. Okay, so for our example here, we would say that the mode is equal to 5 and 100, because they both repeat the same number of times. Here's a quick shot of the entire note sheet for today. If you have any questions or if you need any more additional help with these things, we'll be working on them throughout the entirety of this unit. So you have time to practice and you have time to ask questions. Make sure that you're doing so.